Hi, hello Subboxers. Today we are going to do the tutorial on the December subscription box, and you are going to be making this little snowman mitten hanger. All right, so let's see what's in the box. We have a stencil, very easy stencil, just a few snowflakes and a snowman body. We don't want to make you guys hand do the snowman body in case you were scared. Of course, you have your instructions. You have a bag of wood pieces. You have the backer board, the mitten. You have a variety of paints. We have two large, this is Peaceful River and this is Marshmallow. And then we have ink. And we have Summer Sky, and they have a tiny little pot of yellow and red. We have a jute for our hanger. We have a couple of small wedges and one large wedge. And then the same with the yellow. We have a full yellow and then a half yellow. We have our plastic card as our squeegee. A couple of zip ties and a little bit of ribbon. We have two paintbrushes. You have a round and you have a flat. This is what the flat looks like. Mine are used, but yours are new. And this is what the round looks like. Here, let me give you a better round. This is what the round looks like. And then you have a tiny little glue because that's all you will need. All right, so let's get started. So you're going to want to have a cup of water and a napkin or a paper towel so you can clean your brush and dry it off. And of course, baby wipes are always handy, so you might want to have a baby wipe. And for now, we're just going to concentrate on the mitten. I don't always go according to the written instructions when I do a live tutorial, so your written instructions might not be the same as what I tell you to do on the video, okay? All right, so first we're gonna take our larger yellow sponge and we're gonna take our large container of blue, that's the Peaceful River, and we're going to cover this entire mitten with the Peaceful River paint. And you can paint right on up the cuff to make it easier. And we're just wiping our paint on with the soft side of that yellow sponge in a thin coat. We do have to put a stencil on. We don't want to have to worry about the paint bleeding, so we want our paint to be pretty thin. We're going to put on 2 coats of paint, letting it dry between the coats, all right? We don't want to put a second coat on while the first coat is still wet. Now you notice our wood is a little different this go round. It's darker, it has a lot more grain to it. We were trying out a new supplier. We're not sure if we're gonna stay with it or if we're going to switch back over to our old supplier. Wood is getting very hard to come by and we use a lot of it. Especially this time of year, we've gone through hundreds and hundreds of sheets of wood. All right, so that's our first coat, and we're gonna just let that dry for a second. We can move on to other things while we let that dry. Okay, while we wait for our first layer of paint to dry, we're going to paint the pieces of our snowman. And we have a hat. This is the hat. Now, we want to make sure that we're painting the right side, okay? Not the wrong side. Now, the wrong side, you can see little flashes of burn where the laser hit. You see right here? So anytime there's like little dots or like flashes of where the laser hit, that's the back side. This is the front side. All right, it might help you to piece it all together so that you can tell that it fits together perfectly before you start painting. All All right, so like this is how the hat goes. Now the arms and the rest of the pieces won't really matter. It's just that holly and the hat and the brim and stuff. Okay, so let's start painting these pieces. Camera's at a different angle this time. We've got a new mount. I hope that looks okay. Can you hear how windy it is outside? It's so crazy windy. All right, so I like to separate by color my pieces, what color they're going to be painted. So like all my black pieces, I'll put in one spot. And then the rest of the, like I know these guys are gonna be red, so I'm gonna put those over there. And these are two different colors. And you'll notice that you don't have a green or an orange. We're gonna have to make those. All right, let's get started. I am going to use a small wedge to do my black pieces because the hat's kind of a big coverage. You could use your flat brush if you wanted to though. Now I'm just dipping my paint or my wedge into my paint, and I'm doing a pouncing method just like we do on everything in the studio that we paint. We have two pretty much of the same painting techniques when it comes to most items, and this is the pouncing. Everything will need 2 or 3 coats. And if you have some painter's tape and you want to roll that, stick it to your table and stick your pieces down on it so they don't move, you can do that. It's pretty quick here, so I'm not gonna bother with the painter's tape this morning. All right, that's 1 coat of black on all my pieces. Now I'm going to paint my red pieces. I'm going to use the other sponge, the other small sponge. And I'm going to paint my red pieces. I'm going to paint my scarf. Now you can dump your little paint pot of red out on to your pizza box if you want to, but I think it's just as easy to dip the sponge right in there. It's a wide pod, there's plenty of room. I'm gonna let those dry. Now we're gonna take our wide flat brush. That's this guy here. Can you see that there? And we are going to take out a little dab of yellow. I'm gonna try to put it right on my surface so you can see what I'm doing right here on my table. Now you need more yellow than you need blue. I'm gonna have to clean my brush off real quick because I don't want to stick my yellow paintbrush into my blue paint and get my blue paint all yucked up. Now I'm gonna use the darker blue, the same dark that I used for this mitten. And I'm just gonna take a tiny little bit of it, just a little bit, and I'm gonna mix it with my yellow to make a green. It just takes a very little amount of blue and a lot more yellow, and I actually got too much blue on that. So I'm gonna grab some more yellow. If you have toothpicks at home, those will probably be handy to help you get the paint out of the pod for this step. Toothpicks or popsicle sticks. Okay, so I'm gonna bring a little bit more yellow into my mix here to try and get my green. There we go. So very little blue, lots more yellow. Now I'm just gonna use this brush because it's already the color that I want it, and I'm gonna paint my little holly leaves. Just put a thin coat of paint on those, and you'll have to come back in just a second and put another coat on them. They'll need 2 or 3. There we go. Just set your brush and everything aside there for a minute. Don't let it go for too long because you don't want your brush to dry out, but you'll have enough time to go back and maybe put like a second coat on of your black and your red on, and then you can go back to your holly leaves for another coat. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put a coat of red on my scarf and my berries and my hat brim. I guess not a hat brim, it's like the belt across his hat. And it probably doesn't even need a third coat, so we could probably call that one good. And it actually looks like my holly leaves are dry already. They are very small, so they don't take very long. So I'm gonna come and put another coat on those real quick. And I think I might want one more coat, so I'm just gonna set that to the side. And I'm gonna put another coat on my black hat, my black pieces. All right. Now, let's see. I don't want to clean my brush and mix my carrot orange until all my holly leaves have all the coats on them that they need, because I don't want to have to wash my brush out too many times. So while we're waiting for those holly leaves to dry, because they do need another coat, they actually need a third coat, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint the second coat on my mitten. So if you haven't painted the second coat on your mitten yet, now's a good time to do that. Remember, when you're painting your base, make nice long strokes. Try to go right from the top to the bottom so that you're not picking up your paint right in the middle of the project. And if you don't go top to bottom and you start like right here in the middle and you do a swipe down, go ahead and grab your sponge and just lightly go over the whole thing just to smooth out where you started that paint in the center there. You don't want to leave behind any high parts of paint, and that will usually happen if you start in the middle. Okay, so by now your holly leaves should be dry and you should be able to add your third coat. So add your third coat of paint to those and then set them aside and get your brush cleaned out so that you can mix the orange for your carrot nose. So same as we did before, I'm just gonna take a little bit of yellow Remember to clean your brushes between each one, or if you have an extra brush like I do, you can just go ahead and grab that. Toothpicks or popsicle sticks. And then just mix your red and your yellow until you get the orange that you want. Now, more red will give you a deeper orange. More yellow will give you a lighter orange. I start out with about the same amount, and I do know that I actually need more yellow. we go. Okay, so because my brush is already orange, I'm just gonna use my brush to paint my carrot nose. Now this guy will probably need 2 or 3 coats. So once again, just like when you did your holly, just leave it all out and just keep coming back to it every minute or so. Don't let it dry for 10 minutes because you don't want your brush to get that dry. Okay, at this point I am done with my dark blue paint and I am done with my red and my yellow paint. So I'm just gonna push those to the side, and if you have extra, which you probably will, no doubt, just save them. They're useful. Paint rocks with them or keep them for future projects. Okay, now we're going to put on our stencil. So we're gonna take our stencil and we're going to use the plastic card that came with it, and we're gonna squeegee the stencil down to make sure that it's all stuck to this grid line or to the clear tape. We're gonna flip it over and we're gonna gently peel that grid line backing paper off. We're just gonna roll it on off. If anything sticks, just put a little crease in it, push it down, but you should be good. And then we're gonna take our mitten. We're gonna position our stencil on our mitten, and it should line up perfect because everything is cut on machines this time around, nothing by hand. So there won't be any human variances. We're gonna smooth that down, and then we're gonna take our squeegee and we're gonna smooth it down again. We only really need to squeegee down where the snowflakes and the snowman body are. That's the only part we're putting paint on. We're gonna take the clear application tape and we're just going to peel back slowly, making sure everything stays stuck down. That's supposed to stay stuck down. And then we're going to put that to the side. And then you have this. So now we are going to paint each of those snowflakes and the snowman body, okay? We're gonna use our white paint for that. And we're gonna use our big white wedge. We're gonna dip our wedge into our paint, and then we're gonna dip off on the side of our pizza box or our table cover because we don't want a ton of paint on this. Now we are painting on a stencil and we always risk bleeding through the stencil. So we want our paint to be very light. So we're just going to dab our paint on around our stencil. I like to go around the edges first, and then I'll work my way in. Now your first coat's gonna be airy. There's gonna be lots of blue paint that you're gonna see through it. That's okay. We don't want a real heavy coat of paint. We're just going to get this all filled in with one coat first, and it won't even be filled in. It's just gonna be splotchy. Okay, it's a pretty thin coat. That's okay. We're gonna leave it like that, and we're gonna move on to the snowflakes. Okay, now we're gonna let that dry, and then we're gonna do 2 and then a 3rd coat, letting each dry in between. Okay, my first coat is dry, so now I'm going to put on my 2nd coat. And there's my 2nd coat. We're gonna let that dry before we put on our 3rd coat. Okay, my 2nd coat is dry, so now we're gonna put on our 3rd coat. All right, those are 3 coats. And now we can take our stencil off. Just make sure that you don't get your painty fingers onto your board. And if you have baby wipes, you know baby wipes are always handy. Always handy. We didn't put a pin in everybody's kit this time around because there wasn't much you'd have to pick out with a pin. So if you have a pin, that might be handy. I'm just going to use my fingernails. Just to get that little piece of snowflake that fell off there on the stencil. Okay. All right. Now we're going to take our small yellow sponge and our white paint, and we're going to paint the top part of our mitten here. You can draw a line with a pencil if you want, but I'm just going to eyeball it. So I'm just going to dip my yellow sponge into my white paint, and I am going to just come over here, start at the edge, and I'm just going to swipe right on across. And I'm going to fill in the rest. Just like that. That's my first coat. It's probably going to need 2. You see that? Okay, when your first coat is dry, you can put your second coat of paint on. And we're just gonna go right back over top of it, following the same lines. Just like that. Okay, and now that our second coat is dry, I am going to put a third coat on. You may not need one, but I feel like I paint pretty lightly and I really want a third coat of paint on that. So I'm gonna come in and just put a third coat. Okay, and there's our third coat, and we're going to, while that dries, we're gonna put our snowflakes on. So our snow that's falling, how about that? So we're gonna take our paintbrush, either one of them, it doesn't matter. Make sure it's cleaned off here and dried. And we're gonna take the end of it, the tip, and we're gonna dip it into our cup of white paint. And then we're gonna take that and we're just going to do little drops of snow, just like that. You don't want it heavy because those bubbles will take a long time to dry, but you pretty much have to dip your paintbrush every 2 snowflakes. You'll notice that by your third, it's those snowflakes are pretty small. Now you can just drop your snowflakes wherever you want. Now an alternate way of doing this would be to thin a little bit of this white paint out and then to dip the end of the correct end of the paintbrush into the paint and do more of a splatter. That's up to you. A lot of you have done splatter in the studio before, so you know how it's done. You can do it whatever way you want. Now don't worry too much about getting too low on the mitten with snowflakes, because in just a second we are going to go and wipe in a paint hill, like the snowman is sitting on a ground of snow, a blanket of snow. Do as many or as few of these little snowflake dots that you want to do. Mine is going to be very snowy, apparently. You can do them little clusters of 3. I like the little clusters of 3. I think they're cute. And then just wipe the end of your paintbrush back off. I'll show you what mine looks like. All right, so now we're going to take, I'm going to use the white wedge that we used with our white paint to fill in our snowman and our snowflakes from our stencil. And I'm going to dip it back in to the white paint, and I just want to make like little swoop of a hill, okay? So like there's little mounds of snow. I'm not going to draw it out. I'm just going to do it. Now, if you're more comfortable drawing it out, then by all means, draw it out. But for me, that's all I'm gonna do. And then I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna fill all of that in. And then it's gotta dry, and it's gonna need a couple more coats. Well, that's what that looks like. All right, let's let that dry. I'm gonna go back in. I didn't get my snow dots as low as I want them, so I'm gonna go ahead and just do that now so I don't forget about it. There we go. And we're gonna let that little snowy mound dry there, and then we'll put another coat. Okay, so now it's time for the second coat of my snow mound. And I'm just gonna come in and wipe that on. All right, and then let that dry, and we're gonna do it one more time. Okay, and here's our third and final coat on the snow mound. Okay, we're gonna let that dry, but while that dries, we are ready to work on the stripes on the mitten cuff. So we are going to take our flat brush, make sure you got them cleaned out. You don't want any leftover red, yellow, green, orange paint in it. And again, if you're uncomfortable with just doing this by freehand, you can draw stripes with a pencil if you want. I'm not going to do that. I am just going to dip my brush in my light blue paint. This is our Summer Sky paint. And I'm going to come over and start from about an inch in. Now I am left-handed. You can see I have a brace on my left hand, so mine might be a little awkward. I have more control painting with my left hand than I do my right. However, I do a lot of things with both my left and right hand. So I'm just gonna make a couple of swipes here until I get my stripe the width that I want it to be. And it's about probably just over an inch, but I'm not gonna be crazy about it. Like I don't feel the need to measure it. I'm just gonna run with it. What it ends up being is what it ends up being. Now, these will probably need 2 coats. All right, there are my 3 stripes. They're gonna need a minute to dry because they are going to need a second coat. So we're gonna let those dry before we put our second coat on them. Okay, so our first coat on our stripes is dry, so we're gonna go ahead and paint our second coat. I think it's only gonna need the 2 coats. So I'm just gonna go right over top of the first one. Okay, and that is that. So while those dry, I'm gonna start gluing my pieces on. And we are going to use our little glue. And to make this start, you're just gonna screw the red cap onto the threaded top, and it's gonna puncture it automatically. I have one that's open here, so I'm gonna go ahead and use the rest of that. Dry fit your pieces first. Let me do this upside down so you guys can see it a little better. Dry fit your pieces first. We want to make sure that everything is going to fit on where it's supposed to go before we start gluing them in. We don't want to put the scarf too high and not have room for the nose. We don't want to put on the mouth and then not have room for the nose and the eyes. So we're just gonna put all these pieces on where we want them to go and make sure that everything fits okay. And then we are gonna start gluing them down. Okay, there you go. That's how those are all gonna fit on there. I'm gonna spin this around so I have a better view of it. And then I'm gonna start gluing everything down. Now remember to get your glue in the center of your piece. You don't want it real close to the edges because you don't want it to squish out onto your snowman. Pressure activates the super glue, so once you get the super glue on, just press down. And then just work one by one through your pieces. If you get too much glue on something, you can dab it off on your pizza box, on a paper napkin, or on a tablecloth or cover. Just dab the piece right down on the tablecloth, and it will absorb the excess glue into the table cover. Now you will have enough super glue in your one tube. I actually used an open one I made this once already. So this is the second one of these I am making, and I almost had enough in that one tiny little tube to do 2 of this project here. So you do have enough glue in that one little tube. Make sure your hands are clean before you begin this too. You guys can see that I have paint on my thumbs, so I am getting a little bit of paint where I don't want paint that I will have to clean up. Almost done. I'm going to tip this hat to the side just a little bit compared to the first one that I did, just for funsies. Okay, there we have that. So cute. All right, now we are going to do some highlighting. We're going to use our small round brush for that, and we're going to use our black and our white paint. I'm going to start with the black paint though, and there's no right or wrong to this, guys. You can highlight however you want, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to define some edges of my snowman body. So I'm just going to take the black paint on my brush just a little bit, and I'm going to just kind of draw in some lines to show some, I want to show some definition here. I might just do a little swipe through the snow. I'm going to put some on a scarf so I can see the lines of the scarf. Now to keep a nice tip on your brush, once you dip it into the paint, you come over to your box and roll your brush in the paint a little bit, and it will get a nice tip on your brush. Nice little sharp edge for you. I'm going to put some lines down here on the scarf like it's frayed, like it's got a fringe. And then I'm just gonna come up here on his head and I'm gonna give a little side swipe. Same with this side, just a little. All right, and I think that's all the black I'm gonna do on that part, just there. Now I'm gonna come up here and I'm gonna outline all of the cuff with some dotted lines. I'm gonna go over everything. So I'm gonna start on this line here and I'm just gonna do dotted lines. I'm gonna go around the edges and I'm gonna go down each stripe. Now if you have a black paint marker, you can do this with a paint marker as well, but it works just as well with a nice fine brush. And not all of us have paint markers. Don't overthink this too much. And then across the top. Okay. I'm gonna clean out my brush and I'm gonna take my white paint and I'm gonna put a little bit of white paint on my hat and my buttons. You do your snowman eyes as well if you wanted to, but I am just going to just do a couple swipes of white on the hat. Okay, and then I'm gonna do the buttons. Now I'm gonna take my brush and I'm gonna use the handle end dipped in the paint and I'm just gonna do little dots on my buttons, like buttonholes. All right, and that is it for the painting on this guy. And now we're going to string the hanger. Trim off the excess, move that down, even those out, and then we are going to make the bow cluster. So you have 3 colored ribbons, You're just gonna take those and unravel them and fold them in half together and cut them. Easier said than done. One is just an organza ribbon, so there's no wire, so it does whatever it wants to do. So we're just gonna fold them in half and we're going to just trim. And then I'm gonna take the ends and I'm just gonna cut on an angle. I'm not gonna dovetail them, I'm just gonna cut them on an angle. If you wanna dovetail, you can dovetail. You got 2 zip ties. And take your zip ties and take your ribbon and just make X's with your ribbons, however you want to lay it in there. And take your zip tie and run it around all of it, up through the center of the X, and start fastening it down. And then as you fasten it, just try to fan it out. And before you get that zip tie too cinched down, run that other zip tie underneath it. Trim off the excess of that zip tie, and then take the one you ran underneath all of it and use that to go around both pieces of the jute hanger and cinch that bow down. Trim off the zip tie, and then just fan that cluster out however you want those ribbons. And there you go, all done. And that is your December project. Nice snowman to leave up throughout the winter. All right, guys, thanks for joining us this month. And make sure you post your pictures underneath the correct album in the group page. Thank you.